To review, we're working with Roy Lichtenstein cartoons. Here we see Lichtenstein's work prominently displayed at the 42nd Street subway station in New York City. This piece is right here in Atlanta. It sits on the lawn at the High Museum of Art. So today we're going to finish sketching, outlining, and erasing our pencil lines so that we can start coloring on our cartoon drawings in Lichtenstein style. He had very little white space showing, and so we need to talk a little bit about how to fill in the colors on the other spaces. So he got his images from comic books and magazines, so he really studied how those printing processes work and how those techniques worked so that he could imitate that look in his artwork. So first we need to talk a little bit about the printing process. Comic printing in the 60s had many things in common with the way we print today. And one of the things is that it used 4 colors. And printing is still done that way today. For example, a lot of our printers at home, if you don't have the multicolored cartridge, you have separate cartridges for black, and then the other 3 colors, which are cyan, which is a blue, magenta, which is a red, and yellow. So you have the red, yellow, blue, and then black. When you have something printed professionally, they will actually send a piece of paper through the printer 4 times. So first it'll go through and print the yellow. Then they'll send it back through with a different stencil and it will print the red. Then they'll send it back through with a different stencil again and it will print the cyan, the blue. And then they'll send it back the 4th and final time to put the black on top. So how do you get colors like green? Well, the same way that we do in our classroom. We mix yellow and blue to make green. And what they would do is layer yellow and blue on top of each other to get that green color. So where the stencil would be cut out, those 2 areas would both print, both in yellow and in blue, and visually those 2 colors would mix. They don't actually mix on the paper because the printing is dry, but by layering them together, that's when you get those secondary colors. Now, if you wanted different values of one color, that's where you start to use BenDay dots. BenDay dots were invented by Benjamin Day Jr. in 1879. And what he discovered was that if you made the dots really large in some areas, then you would have a darker value. And if he made them really small in other areas by just using dots of color instead of solid color, then you get a lighter value. So let's take a look and see how that works. So if we look at this close-up from Roy Lichtenstein's work, we can see that on the left, the value is darker, where the dots are larger, and on the right, the value is lighter, where they are further apart and smaller. So when we look at this Lichtenstein nurse, look in particular at her lips. There is a darker red on the lipstick, where the dots are larger, and then her face has a lighter pink, where the dots are smaller. So when we look at our cartoon, we're going to try to imitate some of that. You're going to have one space that is nice and solid. You'll have another space that has BenDay dots in it, and you'll have another space that might have a combination. So you decide, would you like to put down a solid color with the BenDay dots on top of it? That's a possibility. Leave as minimal amount of space white as you can. We will leave the word bubbles white, and then if you have any white eyes or white teeth, you can leave those white. Otherwise, everything else should be colored, especially the background. Think about contrasting colors too. If Garfield is orange, then I certainly do not want to do an orange background. He'll just get lost in that. And remember, pop art and comic strips have their images pop off the paper because they do get that contrast between foreground and background. So kind of think about your coloring. So how are we going to do the BenDay dots? The solid part is easy enough. We can do that pretty easily, but the BenDay dots are a little bit more difficult. We can just put a bunch of dots on there, but if we keep in the style, we know that the printing process is very mechanical and the dots are certainly lined up very much like a machine would do it. So, and that's what Lichtenstein did too. He would make himself an enormous stencil and then he would lay down those dots in very precise order, so, much like a machine. So what I found was something very interesting, and we're going to use that to make our BenDay dots. I found this old roll of ribbon. I don't know, I guess it's ribbon, but look at it. It's got holes in it, and it looks like we could really use this as a stencil for our BenDay dots. So I'm going to cut off a piece, and I'm going to give you each a piece of this, and let me show you how we're going to use this in whatever spot you have for your BenDay dots. So here is a sample. I took that ribbon with the dots in it, and I taped it down. I have a tendency to move things if I don't tape them down. So I taped them down on the spot that I'm going to put my BenDay dots in. And then very simply, I'm just going to take my marker and just trace those circles in there. Now, if I want to have a lighter value, then I'm going to make smaller circles, but I'm still going to use this little stencil so that I get them evenly placed, much like a machine would do. And the only thing is that when I get down to here, I'm going to have to pick up the tape and reposition it and fill up the rest. So you can see how I've gotten started on those dots right there. And I'm going to finish that up and then show you what it looks like. So here you can see I filled in the dots up to where that tape is. So very carefully, I'm just going to lift this off to reveal those dots underneath. And then I'll just take this and I'm going to line the dots up in that stencil once again, tape it down, and that way I can continue on the rest of the shape. Okay? All right, so I finished up that space, and I will carefully remove this stencil, and you can see how that shape got filled up with those mechanical looking dots as if it was printed. Okay? So you can see when I really expanded it and used this entire circle, they got pretty darn close together. And then I could put smaller ones in there also to get them a little bit lighter blue. All right. I could do another color on top of this, like I could do green on top of the orange or purple on top of the orange. My suggestion to you is always do a darker color on top of a lighter color. You can imagine if you had colored this all green and then tried to put yellow dots on top of it, it would not show up very well. So you can mix colors and do a combination of solid and BenDay dots, but just put the darker color on top of the lighter color. All right? So there you go. Remember, when you do those solid colors, just to keep your lines really straight next to each other. So you're going to outline first, and then the next row is going to be very neat right next to it, and then neat next to that. No scribble scrabble. You're big kids now. You know how to make that work. Okay? So we will see how this goes and fill up your paper. And here is a combination of solid with the dots on top. And you can see I made these dots a little bit smaller too. But I did the same thing. I just put it in the center of those little things. So you can try out all kinds of different things. Have fun with this. Bye-bye. Okay, here we go. So I have a white bubble. I have solid, and BenDay dots in one area. One thing I found out while using this stencil, it works absolutely terrific. However, it gets really messy on your hand, and especially right there. So I need to be careful that I don't drag this part of my hand through the white area up top, because that'll just make a big mess. All right, so you're going to work on these and get them all colored up. These are gonna look terrific. Awesome. So just to let you know, this piece by Roy Lichtenstein sold in 1961 for $550,000. It was resold at auction for $2.1 million and then just recently resold again for $43.2 million.